Imagine losing everything in the blink of an eye, your home, your savings, your dignity, forced to risk your last few $100s on an abandoned cursed farm. No one else dares to touch. For Trevor Adams, this desperate gamble leads to an astonishing discovery, hidden deep within the decaying attic stacks of vintage cash, cryptic journals, and secret maps pointing to forbidden experiments conducted decades ago. This isn't just another foreclosure story. It's a pulse-pounding journey into mysterious tunnels, shadowy conspiracies, and chilling revelations that could rewrite medical history. Can Trevor trust the neighbors, decode family secrets, and survive the dangerous legacy of the circle? Keep watching till the end, because this hidden fortune might just cost him everything. And if thrilling mysteries and unexpected twists keep you on the edge of your seat, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more heart-racing stories you won't find anywhere else. Trevor Adams pressed his forehead against the cold window of his small sedan phone in hand, watching the meager digits in his online bank account refresh one last time. $928. Tina saw. Just 3 years prior, he had been a prosperous investment advisor with a towering office, a sleek penthouse, and a net worth that often made him forget the struggles of his youth. But his ambitions had led him to overextend during a risky market surge, and when the crash came, it took his entire fortune along with any vestige of security. He was 43 years old, living out of his car and clutching at any thin sliver of hope. His wife, Rachel, had left early in the downfall. She had tired of his big promises, the pride that kept him from asking for help, and the mounting debts that threatened to swallow them both. Trevor still recalled her parting words, "You're too stubborn to see you're drowning. I just can't watch it anymore." A light drizzle formed rivulets across the windshield as he sat parked behind a county courthouse in Willow Creek, a modest town in a region he barely knew. The crisp flyer taped to a nearby bulletin board first caught his eye the day before, when he'd come to file some personal paperwork. He had rummaged through the posted notices, mostly seized properties, foreclosures, and land auctions. Nearly all of them required a starting bid well beyond anything Trevor could muster. That was when he noticed one final listing in bold black print: abandoned farmstead minimum bid. $900. He read it twice to make sure he hadn't misread. A weathered farmhouse, a few acres out on the fringes of the county. It was a place no one else seemed to want. Trevor recognized with a twist of irony that his grandparents had owned a farm once, though he'd spent his teenage years desperate to escape that sort of rural life. He had always believed that farm work was tedious and unprofitable. Yet now, with less than $1,000 in his name and winter closing in the idea of a roof, any roof seemed like salvation. His body ached from sleeping upright in his car's cramped back seat. He needed a change, even if it was one last desperate gamble. The next morning, he walked into the county auction hall. The room smelled faintly of stale coffee and disinfectant, the hush punctuated by the echo of footsteps on linoleum floors. One property after another opened for bids, each quickly surpassing his limited funds. As his mind started to drift into thoughts of how foolish he was being, he heard the clerk announce, Lot 72, abandoned farmstead, approximately 12 acres. Willow Creek outskirts, minimum bid, $900. His pulse leaped at the words. Silence followed for a moment as the few attendees shifted in their seats. He raised his hand. $900, he said, voice cracking slightly. The auctioneer peered around, waiting for any counteroffer. There was none. A faint wave of pity, confusion, and perhaps relief swept the small crowd as the clerk accepted Trevor's bid. An hour later, with trembling fingers, he signed a few forms, counted out $900 in crumpled bills, and officially became the owner of a farm that had sat neglected for decades. The county records assistant eyed him with concern and offered a word of caution. Something about the property having a difficult history and rumored misfortunes. But Trevor, fighting the current of despair, smiled weakly. "Thanks," he mumbled. "I appreciate the heads up." Deep down, he was aware he might be diving into a mess, yet some part of him held on to the notion that even a ramshackle homestead must be better than living in his sedan. Trevor drove out to the farm later that afternoon. The road led him down increasingly narrow roads, patches of forest thickening with each mile, and finally onto a bumpy gravel path consumed by wild grass. At its end, perched on a slight rise, stood a two-story farmhouse with chipped paint, sagging eaves and windows. So murky he couldn't see inside. An old barn, no better off, loomed in the distance like a forgotten sentinel. The wind whistled through broken boards, creating a ghostly hum that set the hairs on Trevor's neck on end. He parked under an ancient oak whose branches loomed overhead, Stepping out, he felt the soft earth squelch under his worn boots, the sky threatening more rain. For a moment, he questioned his decision. The farm looked barely habitable. The roof sloped precariously on one side, shards of glass littered the ground beneath broken windows, and a tangle of thorny vines had claimed the front porch. This was far beyond a fixer-upper. It was a husk of a property, yet it was also his one shot at not sleeping in his car or turning to a homeless shelter. He forced open the front door, which groaned in protest. A stale, musty odor hit him like a wall, and dust motes swirled in the hazy light that filtered through the broken windows. Inside lay remnants of past lives, a battered sofa with shredded upholstery, a grandfather clock that no longer worked, its face frozen in time, and a worn rug caked with layers of dust and dirt. The kitchen contained rusted appliances so dated Trevor suspected they might be relics of the mid-20th century. Cupboard doors hung askew, hinges corroded. There was no running water, no electricity, at least not in any functional sense. By early evening, he had cleared enough debris to unroll a sleeping bag near the fireplace in what used to be the living room. He discovered a small stash of old firewood in a lean-to at the side of the house, though it was damp and barely caught a flame. Still, the flicker of light and warmth comforted him. He sat there, knees drawn up, with only the glow of the fire to chase away the dark. In that moment, the massive quiet of the countryside enveloped him. It reminded him how alone he had become. Yet he also sensed an odd flicker of possibility. He had never restored a house before. He was an investment advisor by trade, good with numbers, less so with hands-on projects. But desperation has a way of unlocking new skills. Tomorrow, he told himself, he would start with basics. Check the roof for leaks, patch any obvious holes, sweep away the grime. The next step would be seeing if any local tradesman might cut him a break on essential fixes in exchange for labor or a payment plan. The entire place was a gamble, yes, but it was his. For a moment, he recalled Rachel's face, her soft warning about pride. It pricked his heart because here he was, still refusing to call for help from distant relatives or old friends, determined to crawl out of the abyss on his own terms. As exhaustion overtook him, Trevor felt the corners of his mouth curve in a wan smile. If nothing else, he had a solid roof over his head, even if it threatened to collapse, and that was more than he had yesterday. Closing his eyes, he tried to quell the pang of uncertainty that gnawed at his gut. But tomorrow, the real work would begin. The following morning, Trevor woke up to cold drafts seeping through gaps in the walls. With a stiff groan, he rolled out of his sleeping bag and performed a quick walkthrough, shining a flashlight down the dark hallway. The wooden floorboards complained beneath his weight, revealing rotted sections. He'd have to patch soon. He found an old fuse box in a side room, every switch flipped off, wires looking suspiciously frayed. He resolved not to risk turning them on until he could have a professional opinion. Though he had no idea how he'd pay for it, he scoured the property, discovering a half-collapsed tool shed behind the barn, where he found a dented gas can, a moldy tarp, and a push lawnmower with a seized motor. No helpful stash of power tools, no hidden miracle items. The barn's interior was littered with rusted farm implements and an old generator covered in grime. After a bit of tinkering, he realized the generator might still function with some repairs. If he got it running, at least he could power a light or two. Maybe recharge his phone. That afternoon, as he lugged garbage from the house to a makeshift dump pile, he spotted a pickup truck rumbling toward him on the gravel drive. A middle-aged man stepped out, tall and broad-shouldered. Wearing a faded cap, he introduced himself as Pete Logan. "Heard someone finally bought this place," Pete said with a slow drawl. "Used to belong to the Keaton family. Then the Harrisons, then sat empty about 20 years," Trevor noted Pete's direct gaze. The man seemed genuinely curious, but carried a hint of wariness too. Pete explained he owned the farm next door. "If you need anything, I'm your neighbor," Pete said, "though this place, well, it has a reputation. Folks say it's cursed. I don't put much stock in that, but you never know." The casual mention of a curse made Trevor's stomach clench. "I don't believe in curses," he replied. "I just needed somewhere to start over." Pete gave a shrug. "Fair enough. But watch yourself, old man." Charles Harris, he was the last occupant, was known for shady dealings. People around here still whisper about missing shipments. Nighttime visitors, you name it. He disappeared one day without a trace. Some think he skipped town with pockets full of stolen cash. Others say darker things. The conversation left Trevor unsettled. After Pete left, the word disappeared stuck in his thoughts. Maybe it was just local legend. The farm had changed hands a few times, so old rumors lingered. Still, a prickle of unease remained. That night, Trevor lit the fireplace again, keeping his flashlight close by in the growing darkness. A lonely coyote howled from somewhere in the distant fields. Trepidation aside, he felt compelled to continue. He didn't have the luxury of backing out. On the third day, as he cleaned out a small bedroom upstairs, he discovered a pull-down ladder leading to the attic. He hesitated. The ladder looked rickety, the attic possibly infested with vermin. But curiosity nibbled at him, a hidden space in an abandoned house. If there was anything of value left, that might be the place. Gritting his teeth, he grabbed a broom handle, nudged the ladder until it swung down, and gingerly tested each rung. With dust swirling around him, he ascended into the gloom, unaware that what he would find up there would radically transform his desperate plan. The attic felt like another world, dim, cramped, stifling. Trevor swept his flashlight across cobweb-laden rafters and mounds of discarded objects. Broken chairs, dusty mirrors, and boxes that appeared to have been there for half a century. A stale scent of forgotten memories hovered, and the only light came from narrow beams pushing through cracked vents near the roofline. He started poking around, though. Each step over the creaky floorboards made him fear he'd crash straight through the ceiling. Most of what he uncovered was junk: mildewed papers, cracked vases, a couple of rotted suitcases with moth-eaten clothes. But then, behind a heavy old trunk, something caught his eye. A portrait. It depicted a stern-faced man wearing a vintage suit standing in front of the farmhouse in a far better era. The paint was flaking, but Trevor recognized the shape of the porch and the wide fields in the background. A label across the bottom read, "Charles Harrison, 1965. He slid the painting aside, revealing a loose board in the attic wall. The board came away more easily than he'd expected, as though it had been deliberately designed that way. Inside the hollow space sat a small metal lockbox, its surface etched with rust. Trevor's pulse quickened. With a little force and a nearby crowbar, he pried the box open. Inside, he found not one but several neat stacks of money. Old bills, some from the 1960s, others from the 1970s. Shaking. He counted the first stack, 5,000. Then a second, then a third. In total, he had over 50,000 in aging currency. He almost laughed, half in disbelief, half in relief. $50,000 might not solve every problem, but it was a life raft. For a man with barely 900 left to his name, it felt colossal. Yet as he turned to examine the rest of the lockbox, he found something else: a leather-bound journal, brittle with time, and a photograph of several men in suits standing by a barn. The same stern man from the portrait was front and center. Written on the back of the photo in a cramped, looping script were the words, "The Circle, 1965. Trevor flipped open the journal. Dates ranged from the late 1950s to the early 1980s. There were cryptic references to shipments, product, and someone referred to only by an initial R. The final page read, "They're on to us. If you find this, remember, the real treasure isn't the cash. The farm itself holds secrets beyond imagination, only for the one who proves worthy." I left a map where no outsider would look. May fortune guide you. Trevor sat back, breath coming in shaky bursts. A hidden fortune. A map. He glanced at the piles of money, but his mind whirled with more questions than answers. Was the Circle some clandestine group? How was the man in the photograph connected to the vanished Charles Harrison? And what did it mean that Trevor, by sheer accident, had stumbled upon this trove of old currency? His thoughts were disrupted by the sound of an engine approaching the farmhouse below. Alarm jolted him. He carefully stuffed the money back into the box, leaving one small bundle in his pocket for emergencies, and stashed the box beneath a loose floorboard. Flashlight in hand, he descended the attic ladder, hoping whoever had arrived wouldn't see the fresh footprints in the dust overhead. Through a grimy upstairs window, Trevor spied a pickup rolling to a halt in front of the house. Though he expected to see Pete Logan again, he found instead a different figure stepping out. This stranger looked older, mid-60s perhaps, with iron-gray hair and a business-casual outfit at odds with the rural surroundings. He carried himself with the assurance of someone used to being in control. Trevor took the stairs two at a time, forcing a calm expression as he swung open the front door before the man could knock. "Hi there," Trevor said, voice tight. The stranger offered a firm handshake. "Spencer Harrington," he announced, scanning Trevor from head to toe. "I understand you're the new owner of this place. Thought I'd drop by, see if you knew anything about the property's history." Harrington. Trevor recalled the name from the painting upstairs. Charles Harrison. Perhaps a relative? Or maybe he just shared a surname that was close. "I've heard bits and pieces," Trevor replied, keeping his tone measured, but mostly that it was empty. "A long time." A faint smile curled Spencer's lips. Yes, well, Charles Harrison was my uncle. Our family calls him Charles Harrington. He used various surnames, it seems. He disappeared back in 1982, and the property went into foreclosure eventually. I'm the only living relative, more or less, so I keep track of who comes and goes here. Trevor swallowed, suspecting that the man might somehow know about the money. I'm not sure what condition the place was in back then. But it's a wreck now, he said, trying to steer the conversation away from the attic. Spencer's gaze flicked over the shabby interior. No doubt, but there's something about old farmland always has ghosts of the past. He offered a tight-lipped smile. If you find anything, documents, artifacts that might belong to my uncle, I'd appreciate a call. Legally, some of it might fall under his estate. A prickle of apprehension crawled along Trevor's spine. This man was already staking a claim. Of course, Trevor replied, feigning polite ignorance. If anything turns up, you'll be the first to know. Spencer nodded, handing over a business card. I'll let you get back to it, but do be cautious. Not everyone around here would be so polite. With that, he headed back to his truck, leaving Trevor with a hard knot in his stomach. The next several days unfolded in a dizzying blur. Trevor used some of the attic money to purchase basic materials and tools from the local hardware store. He avoided large expenditures to keep suspicion low, quietly patching the roof, fixing the worst of the floor, rod and hooking up the generator to power a couple of lights. Pete Logan dropped by occasionally with friendly conversation, but Trevor shared little about his discovery. He only mentioned he'd found some old keepsakes in the attic. Pete shook his head and said, "Be careful with anything linked to that family," to offering no elaboration. Every night, Trevor studied the leather journal by flashlight, squinting at the coded references. He concluded these men were involved in something clandestine. Smuggling was his best guess, but the details were murky. One name recurred: Jonathan Adams, along with cryptic remarks like, "J. Adams showed me the formula beyond what we expected." Another snippet read, "Experiment results too volatile, must hide them before the circle demands more." The word circle was underlined multiple times, accompanied by warnings about betrayal. Trevor found himself torn between fear and curiosity. He was out of his depth, no doubt. Yet the journal suggested there was more at play than mere contraband or money. What was this formula? Who was J. Adams, and why did it hint at experiments? The greatest puzzle remained the mention of a secret map, presumably hidden somewhere else on the property. On a cool, misty morning, Trevor decided to search the cellar. He'd avoided it due to a musty odor wafting from the stairwell, then indicating mildew and stagnant air. But the journal's repeated hints about hiding places spurred him onward. The cellar was cramped and damp, with shelves sagging under old glass jars of unidentifiable preserves. Flicking on a flashlight, he noted walls of rough stone mortar chipping away in places. As he tapped along the walls, a hollow echo caught his attention behind a row of warped shelving. Carefully, he pushed the shelf aside, dislodging a cloud of dust. His heart quickened as he noticed an oddly new-looking patch of wood set into the stone. It looked out of place in the ancient foundation. Prying at its edges with a screwdriver, he felt it give, revealing a small cubby. Inside lay a single metal container about the size of a lunchbox, sealed tight. Trevor pried open the lid. Within was a worn leather pouch. Inside that pouch was a rolled map, its parchment yellowed. Unfurling it, he saw the outline of the farm's acreage meticulously drawn, featuring shapes of buildings and expansions he didn't recognize. There were lines that looked like tunnels linking the barn, the house, and potentially other structures beyond the property boundary. A scattering of cryptic symbols dotted various points on the map, each labeled with two-letter codes like SCLV and BX. A scribbled note along one margin read, "Only for the rightful bearer, the circle nose attached," was a single small photograph, black and white, showing 5 men gathered around a table in what appeared to be an underground chamber. Trevor recognized Charles Harrison from the attic portrait, but the others were unfamiliar, except for an older man who bore a passing resemblance to Trevor himself, the hair, the jawline. It brought a chill to his veins. His father had died when Trevor was a teenager, or so he believed. But was it possible there was a deeper family link here? He'd never known. As Trevor stood there reeling from the possibilities, he heard footsteps upstairs. "Hello," came Pete Logan's voice echoing down the stairwell. Trevor quickly rolled up the map and tucked it under his jacket, stuffing the pouch back into the metal container and slipping the container into a corner behind some boxes. He emerged from the cellar, feigning a casual cough. "Hey, Pete, didn't hear you come in?" Pete's gaze flicked around, saw your car in the drive door unlocked, thought I'd knock, but no answer. He frowned, noticing the dirt on Trevor's hands and the trace of tension in his posture. Working in the cellar, just clearing out old junk. Trevor answered, forcing a small grin. Must have kicked up some mildew in there. Pete nodded slowly, though his eyes lingered on the sweat beading Trevor's brow. If you need any help disposing of stuff, let me know. I've got a truck. Sure thing, Trevor replied, relieved. Pete didn't push further. As Pete left, Trevor realized that the more he uncovered, the more precarious his position became. Spencer Harrington had made it clear other parties were interested in whatever secrets this place held, and Pete, friendly as he seemed, might be holding back knowledge of his own. Coupled with the photo of a man resembling Trevor's father, the swirling questions about the circle and references to experiments, it all felt like he was tiptoeing through a minefield. For the first time since discovering the money in the attic, Trevor wondered if he should cut and run, sell the property, keep his newfound cash, and start anew elsewhere. But curiosity was a stubborn thing, as was the strange sense that his presence here was no accident. Later that same day, Trevor sat at the battered kitchen table, the newly found map spread before him. A single naked bulb hung from the ceiling, powered by his recently repaired generator. He traced the lines indicating tunnels. It suggested an elaborate underground network, or perhaps old Prohibition-era passageways linking the farmhouse to outbuildings and even crossing into neighboring properties. One mark near the northern edge of the property was labeled LB2, ringed in red. The journal had referenced a formula, hinting at some scientific discovery that Charles Harrison or the Circle had been keen to protect. Could LB2 be tied to that formula? The cryptic references to shipments and experiments in the journal gnawed at him. Perhaps they used these tunnels to move contraband or test subjects away from prying eyes before he could delve deeper. A soft knock at the open front door startled him. A woman in her early 30s stepped into view. She wore jeans, sturdy boots, and a flannel shirt, her auburn hair in a loose ponytail. "Hi," she said gently, holding up a thermos. "I'm Evelyn Logan, Pete's daughter. Thought I'd bring you some fresh coffee." Trevor stood flicking off the generator-powered light. He carefully folded the map, slipping it under a newspaper on the table. "Oh, thanks. That's really nice," he stammered. Evelyn offered a warm smile. "Dad mentioned you've been working here day and night. Figured caffeine might help." She scanned the dingy kitchen, eyes settling briefly on the old newspaper covering something. "This place has potential, but it's overwhelming too." Trevor invited her to sit. She placed the thermos on the table, pulling 2 tin mugs from her bag. Steam wafted upward as she poured. "So you grew up around here?" Trevor asked, seeking a casual topic. "All my life," she replied, sipping her coffee. "Dad runs the farm next door, though. I manage most of it now. He's semi-retired. Not that he'll admit it." She chuckled. "But to be honest, I've always been curious about this property. Town rumors say the Harrison place has skeletons in the closet, but no one seems to know details. Just that Charles was a reclusive man who left." Suddenly, Trevor considered how much to reveal. The memory of Spencer's and Pete's warnings echoed in his head. "I'm learning bit by bit," he said at last. "It's definitely a fixer-upper. But I could use the challenge." Her gaze dropped to his bandaged knuckles. "Looks like you're serious about it. If you need help or equipment, let me know. We're neighbors after all." A surge of gratitude mixed with suspicion rose in Trevor's chest. On one hand, Evelyn seemed genuine. On the other, he couldn't help but wonder if she had a hidden motive. Maybe trying to glean information about the farm's rumored treasure or the secrets behind Charles Harrison. "I appreciate that," he said. "I'll keep it in mind." She lingered a moment longer, as if weighing whether to say more. Then softly, "Dad told me he warned you about the property's history. Whatever that history is, I just hope you stay safe. This community has a way of burying truths it finds inconvenient." After Evelyn left, Trevor returned to the map, mind swirling with her caution. Everyone had some version of the same warning. The Harrison farm was more trouble than it was worth. Yet none of them directly discouraged him from searching deeper, almost as if they expected him to stumble onto something big and they were just waiting to see how he'd handle it. By the end of that week, Trevor had made enough rudimentary repairs to sleep comfortably in an upstairs bedroom without worrying too much about the roof caving in. He used a portion of the attic money for modest improvements: new locks on the doors, a second-hand bed frame, and a small set of decent tools. Each time he spent those old banknotes, he felt a tremor of unease, imagining federal agents or treasure hunters catching wind. At odd hours, he continued investigating the property in earnest. Nights were often spent in the cellar or the barn, testing floorboards, searching for hidden compartments, guided by the references in both the journal and the map. On one such night, he discovered a trapdoor beneath rotting hay bales in the barn's rear corner. Lifting it revealed a dirt tunnel leading into darkness, just as the map suggested. Musty air rushed out, carrying a faint chemical smell that made him cautious about stepping inside. Donning a headlamp, Trevor descended, heart pounding. The tunnel's walls were reinforced with timber beams. At intervals, he found old crates stamped with no recognizable markings, suggesting clandestine shipments. Indeed passed through here, several hundred feet. In the passage branched one route sloping downward. He followed that branch to a chamber that looked suspiciously like a makeshift laboratory, metal tables rusted by time glass. Beakers, scattered notebooks. He felt like he'd stepped into a hidden world suspended in the hush of the underground. Scanning the area, he noticed remnants of dried plant material in a corner, as if someone had once stored or experimented on them here. Some glass vials, tinted green from residue, lay broken on the ground. In one dusty notebook, he found chemical formulas labeled ZB3 or ZB4, with notes detailing testing on subjects and references to rapid growth. Unpredictable side effects. Trevor's stomach clenched. Had Charles and his associates been dabbling in genetic manipulation or pharmaceutical research outside the law? As he pored over the cryptic lab notes, a noise startled him, a faint shuffle echoing through the tunnel. Heart hammering. Trevor switched off his headlamp, plunging the lab into darkness. He held his breath. A minute passed in tense silence before he dared to edge closer to the tunnel entrance. Another shuffle sounded, but from which direction, it was impossible to tell in the pitch black. Finally, the noise faded. He decided it was too risky to remain, scooping up the notebook. He carefully retraced his steps back to the barn trap door and shut it behind him. Outside, the cool night air slapped his face, intensifying the realization that he wasn't alone in these investigations. Possibly Spencer Harrington or someone else had discovered the tunnels as well. Or perhaps it was just an animal wandering. Trevor's nerves felt frayed, even though his curiosity pressed him to delve further. Prudence dictated caution. He retreated to the house and locked the doors. In the safety of the dimly lit kitchen, he leafed through the newly found lab notebook. Entries mentioned collaboration with J. Adams, referencing a unique strain of plant with exceptional regenerative properties. The phrase "the circle grows stronger" surfaced more than once, along with a cryptic symbol resembling interlinked rings. Trevor sank into a chair, the weight of it all settling on his shoulders. Smuggling secret labs, potential scientific breakthroughs, shadowy alliances. He felt miles away from the simple quest for a home. This was bigger, more dangerous, and yet a part of him recognized an opportunity. If these formulas truly had remarkable properties, was there a chance they held extraordinary medical or commercial value? If harnessed ethically, could it become a turning point, not just for him, but for many? The conflict roiled in his gut. Was it moral to pursue that path, or safer to bury these secrets again? One afternoon, Trevor hopped into his car and drove into Willow Creek. He needed groceries and supplies, but he also wanted to visit the county records office. If he could piece together the original ownership details of the farm and unravel the genealogical ties hinted at by the photograph, maybe he'd get a clearer picture of why so many odd references led to an Adams and how it connected to him personally. The county records clerk, a wiry, bespectacled man named Mr. Hoffman, was more than willing to help. "We don't get many folks inquiring about that farm these days," he said with a curious smile. He returned minutes later carrying a slim folder of property deeds dating back to the 1930s. Sure enough, it showed that the land was initially owned by a family named Holloway, then purchased by Jonathan Adams in 1952, later sold to Charles Harrison in 1965. The property changed hands twice more after Charles vanished, each owner reselling or defaulting within a few years, until the county seized it 2 decades ago. Trevor zeroed in on Jonathan Adams. He flipped through birth records but found nothing conclusive. Then near the bottom of the folder, he discovered a mention. Jonathan Adams, deceased, 1978, survived by an unnamed infant son. This was a puzzling note, especially since Trevor's father had told him that no one in the family had lived in Willow Creek. Could it be a coincidence? The clerk shrugged, admitting the records were incomplete and sometimes inaccurate. While Trevor mentally wrestled with these leads, a voice behind him spoke. "Digging into old skeletons, are we?" He turned to see Spencer Harrington leaning against the doorframe with a polite smirk. Trevor's neck tensed. "Just curious about the property's background," he replied, feigning calm. Spencer took off his hat, lightly tapping it against his leg. "Curiosity can be dangerous, especially around here." He lowered his voice as Mr. Hoffman stepped away. "Look, If you're chasing my uncle's secrets, be careful. Others have tried and didn't fare too well. This place has a way of swallowing people's ambitions. Trevor tucked the documents under his arm, forcing a thin smile. I'm just trying to refurbish my house and maybe do some research. Nothing grand, right? Spencer said, eyes narrowing. In that case, you won't mind if I stop by soon, see how you're getting along? Trevor swallowed the knot in his throat. Anytime, Mr. Harrington. He left the records office with more questions than answers, uneasy about the possibility that Jonathan Adams, potentially a relative, had owned the farm prior to Charles Harrison. The clerk's note about an infant son being the sole survivor thrummed in his mind. Could that child be Trevor's father? If so, why had his father never mentioned a connection to farmland, hidden labs, or secret societies? His head pounded with the overlapping mysteries as he gathered groceries. On his drive back, the farmland rolled past under a muted sky. He tried to focus on immediate tasks, patching a few last holes before the weather turned colder. But the bigger enigma tugged persistently at him. The deeper he dug, the more he sensed a high-stakes game at play with multiple participants. Spencer, possibly Pete, maybe the ghost-like watchers in the tunnels, circling around the same elusive prize. Days passed, each marked by incremental progress on the farmhouse and quiet leaps in Trevor's knowledge about the secrets hidden beneath it. He worked by day, fitting new boards, cleaning grime, mending fences. By night, he studied the journals and lab notes, trying to translate chemical jargon beyond his comprehension. Occasionally, he asked around town for references to local legends, but received only half answers or polite deflections. It was as though the entire community knew something they refused to voice. Then on a crisp morning, he stepped out onto the porch to find a folded piece of paper pinned under a stone. It bore a simple message. We should talk. I can offer answers. Meet at the old orchard, south of your land. Sunset. It was signed with the initials AD. Trevor's initial alarm flared, another stranger poking around. But the initials rang a bell. Could AD stand for Aaron Drake, the rumored partner in Charles Harrison's shady dealings he'd read about in the journal? Or was it someone else entirely? He decided to be cautious, taking only a flashlight, the bare essentials and the phone he kept charged by the generator. He arrived at the orchard just as the sun slipped below the horizon, painting the sky with gold and orange. Rows of gnarled apple trees, long untended, stood in a ragged line. He scanned the area, heart hammering. Finally, a figure emerged from behind a trunk, a man in his late 50s with a lean build and silver-streaked hair wearing a dark jacket. Trevor Adams, the man said quietly. I've been expecting you. Trevor stiffened. You have me at a disadvantage. I'm Aaron Drake, the stranger replied, confirming Trevor's suspicion. I was once part of the group your grandfather helped found, though. Perhaps you don't know him by that title yet. He let the words sink in. Yes, Jonathan Adams was your grandfather. Trevor's pulse roared. How would you know that? Aaron exhaled as though deciding how much to disclose. Because I worked alongside him and Charles Harrison when they were developing a remarkable compound, what you might have seen referenced in the notes as ZB3 or ZB4. We called it a medical marvel, but we were naive about its darker potential. Jonathan wanted to keep it pure beneficial. Charles had other ambitions. When your grandfather tried to pull out of the project, the circle, our clandestine group, fractured. People turned on each other. Some ended up dead. Jonathan hid the final research to keep it out of Charles's hands, but I guess Charles had his own backups. Even now, decades later, there are those who seek the formula for personal gain. Though Trevor had braced himself for shocking revelations, hearing them spelled out felt surreal. So what a whistleblower, Aaron offered a bitter laugh. I was a believer in the Circle's original purpose, harnessing advanced biological discoveries for good. But corruption and greed took over. When Jonathan vanished, I laid low, waiting to see if anyone would resurrect the research. Then I heard rumors about someone buying the farm for pennies, rummaging around old tunnels. I recognized the surname Adams in the county records. No coincidence, Trevor's breath came quick. If this man was telling the truth, it confirmed that his father or grandfather had ties to a major scientific secret. What do you want from me? To protect you? Aaron answered, voice steady. And to protect the work, if it can be salvaged. Jonathan believed in you. Well in his bloodline, he believed a descendant might handle the knowledge responsibly. I'm here to make sure you don't fall victim to the same forces that destroyed him. They talked until the moon rose high. Trevor listened as Aaron Drake filled in the missing pieces. In the late 1950s, a handful of researchers, biologists, chemists, and entrepreneurs banded together in secrecy to conduct experiments on a newly discovered plant species believed to accelerate healing and cellular regeneration. Jonathan Adams provided the land and some early funding, while Charles Harrison brought additional investors. The Circle, as they called themselves, believed they were on the brink of a revolutionary medical breakthrough. However, initial tests revealed side effects, erratic mutations, neurological shifts that led half the group to argue for more caution. Charles and his faction pushed for more aggressive experimentation. When tragedies occurred ranging from lab accidents to test subjects suffering bizarre complications, Jonathan tried to dismantle the Circle's operations on his property. But by then, unscrupulous partners had already begun using the formula for profit, smuggling samples to unknown buyers. Jonathan moved to hide the main supply of the genetically modified plants in the final refined formula, the one that had the greatest potential if used correctly, but also posed the greatest danger if weaponized. He confided in Drake, who eventually helped Jonathan vanish after they realized Charles might resort to violence to reclaim the research. Charles then sold part of the property but kept a portion of the lab going underground, funneling money into hush funds and forging alliances with powerful interests. Jonathan tried to shield his family, especially his son. "Your father from all of this," Aaron explained. "When Jonathan died, your father was led to believe the farmland had no value. He severed ties and changed his name, trying to outrun the ghosts." Trevor's mind reeled. His father had rarely spoken of his childhood, claiming he grew up in various foster homes. Now it seemed that was an elaborate story, or at least only partially true. "So my father is alive out there somewhere?" Trevor asked, voice trembling. Aaron nodded. "He's gone by different aliases over the years. The last I heard, he was in Nevada under the name Richard Wolf. The Circle's remnants may still be searching for him. They're certainly watching you." A gust of night wind rustled the orchard's leaves. Trevor felt a deep chill. He realized this was bigger than just him. "If this compound is as dangerous as you say, maybe it should remain buried." Aaron held his gaze. "It can be dangerous in the wrong hands, yes, but it can also save lives." Jonathan believed in a future where its potential was harnessed ethically. That dream died with him unless you choose to revive it. Trevor thought of the lab notebooks, the coded references to experiments, and the quiet yearning in the last pages of Jonathan's journal where he'd scrawled lines about wanting to heal the terminally ill. If this substance truly had medical uses, how could he in good conscience destroy it? But then how could he ensure it wouldn't be perverted by greed? As the night deepened, Aaron offered him a final warning. "Spencer Harrington is the nephew of Charles. He'll stop at nothing to secure that formula. There are others, two powerful parties who see dollar signs or tactical advantage in ZB4. They're unscrupulous. Be vigilant." With that, Aaron departed into the darkness, leaving Trevor under the twisted silhouettes of apple trees. His heart hammered in his chest as he realized he was now at a crossroads. The money from the attic was a small boon compared to the magnitude of this revelation. He could turn tail, sell the farm, and vanish into anonymity, or he could finish what Jonathan Adams started, somehow ensuring the research served humanity instead of exploitation. Returning to the farmhouse, Trevor locked every door and window. He spent the next few nights wrestling with possibilities. The notion of contacting his father lingered in his mind, though the man had essentially abandoned him long ago. Was it even safe to track him down? If the same forces that threatened Jonathan were still active, that could expose his father to danger, or vice versa. Meanwhile, Evelyn Logan dropped by, more often offering help and curiosity in equal measure. She revealed that her father, Pete, had once worked for Charles Harrison's farm decades ago, quitting abruptly under suspicious circumstances. Dad never talks about those days. She said, eyes clouded with concern. It's like he saw something he wishes he could forget. Trevor weighed whether to trust Evelyn. Something about her straightforward kindness and the glint of sincerity in her eyes made him want to confide, yet caution won out for now. Instead, he asked if she'd ever seen old tunnels or hidden labs under her own property. She chuckled, unsure if he was joking, then admitted that their land had several sealed-off entrances. Her father used to insist she stay away from them. He said they led nowhere, she recalled, but I always suspected otherwise. A few days later, Spencer Harrington arrived unannounced again. This time he looked tense, as though forced into a corner. "Mr. Adams," he said, skipping pleasantries, "we need to talk. I know you've been exploring tunnels and hidden rooms. I also know you've come across my uncle's journals or formula references." Trevor tried to feign ignorance. "I'm just cleaning out junk." Spencer's jaw tightened. "Don't insult my intelligence. Listen, You may think this property is all yours, but what's buried beneath it is a legacy I have a legitimate claim to. My uncle didn't just vanish, he was targeted. If you found any data maps or notebooks, hand them over. We can come to an arrangement. A swirl of anger and fear arose in Trevor. This wasn't just a polite suggestion. It sounded like a threat. I'm not sure that's how the law works, he replied calmly. And from where I stand, anything on my legally purchased land is mine to investigate. Spencer's stare hardened. You don't know what you're dealing with. If you pursue this further, you'll attract the attention of people far more dangerous than me. Don't drag your father's name into it either. He left for a reason, Trevor stiffened. So you do know he's alive? Spencer let slip a faint, ironic laugh. Yes, and you might be handing him a death sentence if you keep opening old wounds. You found money in the attic, didn't you? That's mere crumbs compared to the true value of the formula. But with big value comes big risks. The standoff felt electric. Eventually, Spencer backed off with a final warning. Think carefully about your next move. He left Trevor on the porch, the tension so thick it weighed on the chilly autumn air. That evening, Evelyn noticed Trevor's distant manner when she stopped by with fresh bread. She asked if everything was okay, but he shrugged it off. After she left, Trevor realized he needed an ally, someone who knew the terrain and had no apparent stake in the research's exploitation. Maybe Evelyn could be that ally. But first he had to confirm that her father, Pete, wasn't secretly in league with Harrington or other dangerous forces. With the situation escalating, Trevor resolved to check the barn tunnel again, searching for the elusive LB2 area marked on the map. If that was where the plant specimens or formula were stored, he needed to see it before someone else did, before a potential confrontation left him empty-handed and powerless. And if it truly contained a discovery that could change medical science, he had to decide bury it again or bring it into the light. Late one night, Trevor returned to the barn, quietly prying open the trap door beneath the hay. This time he came prepared: durable boots, fresh batteries in his headlamp, extra flashlight, and a rope in case of collapsed sections. Tension nipped at him with every step down the ladder into the tunnel's stale darkness. The labyrinthine passages beckoned like a forbidden maze. Following the map's guidance, he bypassed the side corridor he'd explored before pressing deeper into the main passage. The air grew damp, and the once sturdy timber supports showed signs of rot. Water dripped somewhere, echoing eerily. Trevor paused when the map indicated a left turn that led to LB2. The corridor descended the floor, slick with moisture. Eventually, he emerged into a cavernous chamber. He swept the beam of his flashlight across what looked like large metal cabinets, one side warped and rusted. In the center stood a pair of heavy steel doors, chained and padlocked. This presumably was LB2. A faded sign above the doors bore a stenciled phrase, Livestock and Botany Level 2, though it was half peeled away. An immense sense of foreboding sank in. He tested the chain and found it heavily corroded, breakable with enough force. Carefully, he used a crowbar to pry loose one link until it snapped. Pulling the doors open, he coughed as a foul odor wafted out. The space beyond was lined with metal stalls, some reminiscent of animal enclosures, others rigged with overhead grow lights long since dead. A row of large glass cylinders stood near one corner, dusty and cracked. He approached these cylinders, noticing swirling residue inside as if plants or organisms once thrived there. In a nutrient bath, papers strewn across a nearby table held diagrams of leaf structures and references to enhanced regeneration. Among them, Trevor saw Jonathan Adams's familiar handwriting meticulously recording test results. Scanning the notes, he found mention of an attempt to treat advanced cancers, early signs of success overshadowed by unacceptable mutation rates. Then in a locked cabinet, its glass door easily shattered. He discovered sealed vials. Each was labeled ZB4, final iteration with a date June 1978. Though likely far past viability, they glowed faintly green under his flashlight. This was it, the heart of the secret. The formula designed for accelerated healing, locked away for decades. Trevor felt a swirl of conflicting emotions, wonder at the possibility, horror at what might have transpired during the experiments. He carefully placed the vials in a padded pouch, determined not to leave them unguarded. If someone like Spencer got a hold of them, there'd be no telling how they would be misused. Footsteps, faint at first, but unmistakable against the damp floor. Trevor's muscles went rigid. He clicked off his headlamp, plunging the chamber into darkness, ears straining. The footsteps drew closer, a flashlight flicking across the far wall. Trevor crouched behind a large metal cabinet, heart pounding so loudly he feared it would give him away. A voice called out softly, "Trevor, are you in here?" Shock froze him momentarily. Evelyn Logan's voice. Why was she here? Did that mean she was allied with someone else, or was she genuinely searching for him? He weighed his options, remain hidden or risk revealing himself. If it were Spencer or some unknown figure, they could have easily impersonated her. But her tone rose laced with worry. "Trevor, I saw your car in the barn open. Please, if you're down here, answer me." Realizing she sounded sincere, Trevor emerged with the headlamp turned on low. "Evelyn, be careful," he hissed. "It's not safe." She spotted him, relief flooding her features. "I figured if you were exploring these tunnels alone, you might get hurt." Her gaze wandered to the chain on the floor, the broken padlock. Then she caught sight of the vials in Trevor's pouch. Her expression turned solemn. "So it's real." "Everything Dad warned me about. These are the experiments Charles funded." Trevor nodded, voice hoarse. "We need to get out of here. I'll explain everything, but not now." Together, they hurried back toward the ladder. Evelyn seemed shaken but resolute, glancing over her shoulder at the dark corridors, as if half expecting a phantom to materialize. When they finally emerged into the barn, Trevor sealed the trapdoor again. They stepped outside to see the faint light of dawn creeping over the horizon. Evelyn turned to him. "I understand now why you've been so guarded, but we can't face this alone. My father might know more. He left Charles's employment for a reason. And if there's real medical value here, we can't just bury it." Trevor gently tapped the pouch containing the vials. "I'll tell you everything. But first we need to ensure no one else gets their hands on these." They walked back to the farmhouse in exhausted silence, forging an unspoken pact. The secrets of the abandoned property had transcended rumors and local legends. They held the potential for groundbreaking discoveries or devastating abuses. Whatever path they chose, Trevor realized they had crossed a threshold. There was no turning back. In the end, Trevor's journey wasn't just about finding hidden riches or exposing decades-old conspiracies. It was about reclaiming his life, restoring honor to his family's legacy, and turning darkness into hope. Together with Evelyn Logan, he chose courage over fear, transparency over secrecy, and integrity over greed. The abandoned farm now stands as a beacon of second chances, proving it's never too late to build something meaningful from the ashes. If you loved watching Trevor unravel the secrets of the circle and admired his resilience in the face of overwhelming odds, hit the like button and share your thoughts in the comments below. Do you think Trevor made the right choice? Would you have handled things differently? Let's discuss. And remember to subscribe because more thrilling stories filled with drama, danger, and redemption are on the way.